right, crim 4. Let's knock out chapter 7. Of course, my dog is very loudly drinking water in the background. Okay, good. He finally stopped. So any kind of that slobbering noise that you heard in the background, sorry, that was my dog, of course, deciding at the very second that I hit record to get a big drink of water. So, assistance of counsel. When we're talking about the assistance of counsel for purposes of this class, we're talking about you having the right to an attorney or a lawyer. So, Chapter 7 talks about that right. And we're going to kind of start with the whole concept of conviction in absentia. So, what the heck does that mean? In absentia basically means that a person is not there. So, what we're talking about when we say conviction in absentia is that a person has been convicted when they weren't there, meaning they weren't present in court. And you're thinking to yourself that there's no way that's possible because you have the right to confront witnesses and hear evidence against you and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let me kind of explain where we're going with this. And I'm going to give you an example of a case where a pretty kind of high profile case where this happened. There is a man who's still alive today, named Roman Polanski. And his name might sound familiar to you, might not, but Roman Polanski is a very famous Hollywood director. And Roman Polanski made quite a few movies. He continues to make movies, but he made a lot of movies kind of in the 70s and has won Oscars and all that kind of stuff. But also in the United States, he was arrested and charged with unlawful sex with a young girl. I want to say she was something like 13. So he was charged with molesting a young girl. Somehow, some way, probably because he's rich and famous, he was able to get out on bail when this trial was pending. And during that time, he had gone to his first court hearing while on bail, and he was ordered to return for his trial. And prior to that time, he decided to jump bail and move to France. So, because he had notice of his trial date, he had been ordered to be present, the court just went ahead with the trial without him there. He had all of the required notice. He knew when he was supposed to be there. He had been given all the proper notification. So because all of that information had been shared with him and he chose not to show up, the court was able to go forward with the trial without him being present. And he was convicted in absentia. He remains in France, and this was like 30 years ago, something ridiculous like that. France, they're not big fans of Americans, and although I would have to say I have visited France twice, just on vacation, and they were very nice. But anyways, the French don't typically are not known to be big fans of Americans, and we don't have a really good agreement with them for extradition. So they won't send him back to us. He won't come back here because he knows he's going to jail or prison if he comes back. So that's an example of a person being convicted in absentia. A lot of the stuff that your book talks about, though, is when people get very disruptive during their trial. Corey Muhammad was a really good example of being disruptive during the trial, and he is the guy in Fresno who killed a security guard at the Motel 6 on Blackstone and I think it was Ashland. And then he went into hiding for a couple days, and then he went downtown Fresno by the Catholic Charities, and he killed, I believe, 3 more men down there. And he was arrested by the Fresno Police Department. And while he was in court, every time he went to court, he would start to be disruptive in the courtroom. And basically the judge told him, if you continue to be disruptive, I'm going to kick you out of the courtroom. And the judge does have the right to do that. So he could have been convicted in the courtroom in absentia while he wasn't there. His case is really interesting, Corey Mohammed's, and we're going to talk about it a lot more during this class, but he claimed that he was incompetent to stand trial and that he was, I believe, mentally ill at the time he committed the offense. But when the judge told him, if you can't control yourself in court, I'm going to have to kick you out, suddenly he was able to control himself, which was something that kind of made people believe that he was indeed sane. Anyways, makes sense? So I don't know. Anyways, so these are some just some facts about being able to be present during your trial. This slide always gets me because it seems so archaic. But there are some ways that the judge can allow for a person to remain in the courtroom. They can bind and gag them. I've never seen a person be actually bound and gagged. This means, put a gag over their mouth. And I have seen a person bound before into their chair. And I will be honest, I have seen a person with a spit mask on and they have the restraint chairs. I have seen people in restraint chairs with spit masks in court because they would go into the courtroom and they would immediately start trying to spit at the judge or the attorneys or whoever was in there. So that is constitutional. It's not pretty, and it's not a way a judge wants to have a trial. They could cite them for contempt. Typically, the person who is being that defiant in court really doesn't care. Or they can tell them you're leaving the courtroom until you can conduct yourself properly. The person can leave the courtroom for a short period of time. We kind of already talked about that. If they are so disruptive that the court can't proceed, they can be removed from the courtroom. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall have the assistance of counsel for his defense. So anytime, and this is per the Sixth Amendment, anytime a person is at risk of losing their freedom, they have the right to have an attorney. Okay, anytime you're at risk of losing your freedom, you have the right to have an attorney. Even in minor cases, and I believe we might have a question on the quiz that has something to do with whether or not you have the right to an attorney for a misdemeanor case. Do you have the right to lose your freedom in a misdemeanor case? The answer to that question is yes, you can be imprisoned for a misdemeanor. So of course, absolutely. It did not always used to be like that. But yes, absolutely. If you have the right, there's a possibility that you're going to lose your freedom, then you have the right to have an attorney. No matter how petty. Does that mean you have the right to a good attorney? Not necessarily. I know that's kind of the more scary part. You also have the right to represent yourself in court if you choose. Is this a good idea? In my opinion, ever? Not in my opinion. Most attorneys would tell you it's a bad idea. Most judges would tell you it's a bad idea. Are there reasons why people do this? There are. We're going to talk about at least one of those shortly. But you do have the right to represent yourself in court if you choose to do so. In order to do so, you must do so knowingly and intelligently. What does that mean? Who has the ability to judge whether you are intelligently and knowingly waiving your right to counsel? Typically, the judge gets to make that decision. How does he know if you are knowingly and intelligently waiving those rights? Again, this is a tough call. Typically, if you are waiving your right to counsel and choosing to represent yourself, most times the judge is probably going to appoint someone as standby counsel, just in case. And by counsel, again, we're typically talking about an attorney, a lawyer. So there'll be someone who will be appointed to help you if you need help. Make sense? Okay. Like how I asked that and you can't answer me, so I know that this kind of sucks about the whole online thing. When you choose to represent yourself, there is a saying: an attorney who chooses to represent himself or chooses self-representation has a fool for a client. Yes, this is a very common phrase that you will hear in court when a person chooses to represent themselves. Again, we talked about earlier, there are sometimes reasons why people would choose to represent themselves. Who do you think cares more about your freedom? You or some public defender? I'm thinking I care more about my freedom than my public defender, right? So you can kind of understand in certain instances why people might think, who's got my best interest at heart? Who really cares more about me than me? You know, who knows more about the law? You know, that's a whole other question. But I've seen some amazing defense attorneys, and I've seen some horrific defense attorneys. And if you don't hire your own or know who to hire, it can be a real crapshoot. You can get somebody that's amazing, or you could get somebody who's terrible. And getting a terrible attorney can be disastrous. Really, I mean, disastrous. Again, as soon as the shift in the investigation goes from investigating to accusing, you have the right to an attorney. Now, this is a real gray area. As soon as someone starts asking me questions about a crime and I think that they suspect me, I'm going to shut down. But it's very difficult to be real clear on where that line is. We talked about Miranda. You know, you realize that when you are not free to go and you are being questioned, that Miranda needs to take place, which we talked about before. Okay, you have the right to effective counsel. You don't have the right to good counsel. Okay, this is again another kind of frustrating, really hard, and I've seen this happen. I've witnessed this happen before, where some attorneys, again, I've seen amazing attorneys who really care about their clients, and I've seen attorneys who don't care at all and just want to make it through the day so they can get their paycheck and go home. Some are going to do bare minimum and be effective, and some are going to knock it out of the park every single time. Are you going to be the lucky one that gets that rock star? Or are you going to be the unlucky one who gets the one who really doesn't care? It's very difficult. And, you know, in an everyday life, that's what it's like everywhere. Are you going to get the probation officer who really cares? Are you going to get the instructor who really cares? Are you going to get the, the guy at Me and Ed's who really takes the time to put the cheese on the pizza, like all the way to the outside? Or are you just going to get the guy that just throws it in the middle? You know what I'm saying. So you have the right to effective counsel, but you don't have the right to good counsel. So you have the right to someone who has knowledge and is capable, according to the law, has passed the bar exam, but you don't have the right to good counsel. Counsel is considered ineffective if, when they're representing the defendant, they fail to meet the standards of competency. If they make crucial errors, then there is recourse. An appeal can be filed. Only if they're crucial errors. If they're lazy, is that a crucial error? It kind of depends. So this is kind of tricky. Public defenders and appointed counsel. These are people who are appointed, meaning they're paid for by the taxpayers, by us, by we the community, to represent defendants who can't afford their own attorneys. These defendants are referred to as indigent persons or indigent defendants. And let me tell you, based on my experiences working in the juvenile courts, easily 90% of the youth who came through the court system were represented by public defenders or appointed counsel. Very few people hired their own private attorneys. Does that mean all those people were indigent? No. But most people were represented by public defenders. Public defenders are insanely overworked. They have just a ridiculous amount of cases, and a lot of them, it's super frustrating to see the amount of work that public defenders have. What's the difference between a public defender and appointed counsel? So let's just imagine that let's see, I go out with my best friend, my two best friends, the three of us. We go out together, the three of us, and we commit a crime together. And none of us decide that out of the three of us, nobody wants to hire an attorney. Can we all be represented by the same attorney's office? Because I want to roll over on my friends. The public defender represents me, but I want to blame my two friends for the crime that we all committed together. That same office can't represent me and my friends because I'm going to roll over on them. I have to have a different office represent each of them because we're going to rat on each other. So typically you're going to have a public defender's office that's run by the county, and then you're going to have other kind of private agencies that contract with the county to hire attorneys that get paid the same as public defenders, but it's not the same office, so we're not being represented by the same people. I don't even know if that makes sense. But this has happened many times, especially in juvenile cases. Imagine when you have 15 kids get arrested together. Oh my gosh, this gets really complicated. Anyways, we're going to move on. Summary, there we go. Defendants have the right to be present at trial unless they start acting a fool, or they just choose not to show up, like Roman Polanski. After the trial is started, if they want to act like fools, they don't have to be there. The defendant has the right to counsel in all criminal proceedings, and if you are indigent or you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you.